Okay, so our first panel discussion is on translating research to commercialization. So this is one of the issues that JCATI is very interested to promote. The basic idea is that once we have this fantastic research that is being done at four-year institutions in the state of Washington, potentially in collaboration with aerospace industry, how can we promote translating this research to commercialization? So our first panel are here to kind of shed some light into that complicated process, that valley of death that Ross talked about. So our panelists to my left are Travis Woodland. He's the Director of Business Development for the College of Engineering and Architecture at WSU, starting at WSU Federal Reporting Officer in 2007. Mr. Woodland was responsible for ensuring Washington State University compliance with the Bayh-Dole Act and other laws providing advice regarding internal compliance policies, and engaged heavily with the United States government officials on behalf of the university. Travis' approach to technology transfer is to manage the entire process from the lab prototype to licensing or startup acquisition. Since 2010, over $10 million in strategic investment was issued for startup companies with technologies managed by Mr. Woodland. I have all the panelists' bios. I'm not going to read all of them. They are all very elaborate, and I don't want to take too much of your time. So this is Travis. So Travis will shed light on kind of this translation of research to commercialization from the university side. We also have Grant Norton, who's the professor in the School of Mechanical and Materials Engineering on the panel from WSU and the Dean of the Honors College. Professor Norton obtained his PhD in materials from Imperial College in London in '89. He's the author or co-author of about 200 papers in the archival literature, several books and 2 textbooks, several book chapters and 2 textbooks. Professor Norton served as a deputy editor-in-chief of the Journal of Material Science and is on the editorial board of Journal of Nanotechnology and on the international editorial board for Journal of Materials Education. From 2009 to 2011, Professor Norton was on the board of director for the Washington Technology Center. He currently serves on the several boards, including the Pacific Northwest Research Laboratory, Chemical Imaging Initiative Review Board, and the advisory board for Thomas Foley Institute for Public Policy and Public Service. Thanks, Gordon, for Norton, sorry. Professor Norton for being on the panel. Next, well, you switched seats. Okay, sorry. No. So next is Pavlo Rudenko. So Pavlo, also known as Pasha, is the CTO of TriboTEX. He's a PhD candidate at WSU in material science. His research is sponsored by the Department of Energy via the Hydropower Research Foundation funded by the Department of Energy, a NASA grant, space grant, and a Singularity scholarship. The preceding research was conducted with the Materials Research Center at WSU and the Tribology Group of Energy Division of Argonne National Laboratory with extensive material characterization having been done at Pacific Northwest Research Lab. So Pasha is representing on the panel a successful PhD candidate who now is the CTO of his company with a lot of energy and enthusiasm for research and commercialization. Last but not least, we have Bill Rodman on the panel. Bill is the CEO and the founder of InVision Technology, and each of our panelists have some slides to share with you. He was the president and the founder of True North Consultant, and also from 1999 to 2006. and from 97 to 99, he was the Director of Manufacturing Engineering at Hardcore DuPont Composites. We're very pleased to have Bill on the panel. InVision Technology is a company focused on innovating and commercialization of cellular core design, tooling and manufacturing technology for aerospace and automotive technology sectors. So without further ado, I'm going to start the panel. So each panelist will give you an introduction, about 7 to 10 minutes, about their vision of all the issues surrounding translating research to commercializations, and then we will open up the session to Q&A, and hopefully you can write your questions as they're presenting. All right, so Travis will go first. Thank you.
Okay, good morning, everyone. So a lot of what the university does, is related to technology transfer in a lot of ways. This little chart, which some of you probably can't read because the words are a bit small, is supposed to indicate how the university is supposed to be a center for creative thought and creative output. And our outputs can be many different things. It can be new research technologies. It can be a workforce that is ready to use those technologies out in the workplace. It can be a place where industry comes to learn new ways of doing things, or to be new ways of doing things they already know how to do. And more recently, we've been focusing a lot on economic development, helping to create new jobs and new industries and new companies in the state of Washington. And the university, WSU and all others, are in a unique position to take advantage of the vast resources we have with our amazing faculty, our very creative students, and try and make sure that we're putting out the best version of those outputs for the benefit of Washington and, of course, the U.S. generally. As far as working with business goes, there's 4 primary ways that businesses tend to interact with us, and this graphic is kind of meant to show the landscape. Our favorite, of course, is gifts. We love gifts, and that doesn't have to be financial. It can be time. It can be advice. It can be equipment. And you can see on the vertical axis, as technology gets more mature, the university sets up what we call service centers, and that's a way for universities to interact with businesses in a way where we might do a measurement on a material or some other type of work with a company, but generally there's no intellectual inputs, there's no new intellectual property associated with that, and you can see the contracting formality is fairly low. On the right side there, we've got more complex interactions, what I would consider more interesting interactions, where we're talking about sponsored research. We're talking about licensing technology created by the university or created jointly with an industry partner or several industry partners. And of course, there's quite a bit more contracting formality that goes with that. We might be pooling resources from several private entities. We might be pulling in resources from the federal government or the state government. And of course, licensing always has additional complications. I think it's important to think about the way that technology kind of makes its way through different gauntlets, I call them, over a period of time. When we first hear about something new, or a new project, a new idea from a faculty member, we like to be very, very optimistic, and we assume that it's going to be the best thing ever, and it's going to have lots of potential. But over a period of time, we have to put it through several different tests, and those might be feasibility tests. It might be information that is non-patentable, non-protectable from an economic perspective. And this kind of goes in with Russ's discussion about the valley of death. These are different steps along that valley of death that you've got to get across. And one of those is whether or not an invention is even intellectually protectable, whether or not it is economically feasible, whether or not there is a market for it, or whether the supply chain can be put together. And so you can see as this pyramid gets smaller and smaller, the percentage of new ideas that actually become commercial opportunities, gets fairly small. All of this is based on data from AUTUM, which is the Association for University Technology Managers. And so this isn't meant to put anybody in a pessimistic point of view. It's actually meant to set the stage for what I consider, in my position as the Director of Business Development, to be the best way that we can try to get technologies from the lab out into the marketplace. And that is by working with industry as much as possible and as early as possible, so that we can give the technology the best start we possibly can. So on the right there, you'll see a couple of major subject headings of technologies, mainly out of the College of Engineering, but we work with others as well, that have a lot of promise. They're sort of our key technologies that we're working on right now. And what I try to do on a day-to-day basis is find the WSU researchers, again mainly in engineering, who have potential platform or disruptive technologies, really new ideas that could have broad applicability across many industries, or very, very focused applicability in, say, biojet or new plane materials, nanotechnology, that sort of thing. And then try to help them find the companies, the industry partners, the supply chain partners that will pull that technology out of the lab and help us figure out what are the proper questions to ask, whether it's about the material itself or whether it's about the manufacturability or the economic analysis or how you put together the proper supply chain. And so we can be working in parallel with the eventual customers of this technology while we're doing the feasibility assessment and we're doing the scale-up development and all those other things that you have to do to get a technology from the lab out into the real world. Many times, the way that this process happens is to create a long-term research collaboration with one or more industrial partners. And that gives us the ability to work on a project with their eventual products in mind. And that can be a material that they sell for reuse. This could be a supplier of Boeing or a supplier of Aerojet or some other company. Or it could be the final end user. And we can tailor some of the research and do some very specific tests or prototyping that lets us know very, very quickly whether this material is proper for that use. And then, if necessary, start doing things like scale-up analysis. This has worked in the past. This is one of our best examples of previous technologies. This is our microwave sterilization technology. We do have a startup company called Food Chain Safety who's utilizing this now. And I think it's also a good example of the timeline on some of these really fundamental disruptive technologies. This work started basically around the year 2000, and just this year we're finally starting to get commercial units into food manufacturing facilities. And the food industry is incredibly excited about that, but it's worth noting, over and over again that it did take 14 years to get it to that point. It took a lot of help from industry, it took a lot of help from the government, it took a lot of help from a lot of smart people to do the prototyping, to rethink, to work on the supply chain, to work on the federal regulations that it was going to take to make sure that this technology had a chance to succeed in the marketplace, and to create the ecosystem around packaging and food processing that would actually result in a commercially viable product. And so what WSU did, and we may have been pioneers to some extent back in the early 2000s, is bring in multiple food companies to actually help with the technology assessment, to help design the equipment, to help think long-term about what government agencies we'd need to interact with, what ancillary technologies, again around packaging especially, would have to be developed in order to make the entire process feasible. And then, of course, the food companies that would be using our microwave sterilization would have to develop products to put through that. And so over a period of several years, they developed new formulations, which are going to be on the shelves relatively soon in your local grocery store. They're going to have to develop their own food products to create the economic incentive to purchase the equipment our startup company is making. And we're trying to repeat that process with Dr. Norton's technology, which he'll talk about in a moment.
So thank you, Travis, and good morning, everyone. So I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about commercialization from the faculty members' perspective. So what I did in that context to sort of set the scene, and I've been involved in technology commercialization really since I came to WSU, and prior to coming to WSU, I'd spent almost 8 years in industry working for two big multinationals, and I'd been involved in their central research labs. So my whole prep for coming into academia was 8 years of trying to develop products that companies could sell and make money. So I was already attuned to this need, I think, within myself to develop commercial products. But when I started to look around for information for this presentation, I went to this WSU strategic plan and I pulled down a couple of primary performance indicators that WSU is mapping itself internally but also externally to the peer group that it aspires to. So one of the things that you can see from these data, and this is startup businesses resulting from university research and outreach. So it's not, so the total WSU commercialization package is obviously bigger because there's licensing and other things that happen. But this is startup companies. And so one of the things that particularly impressed me is how well we're doing recently and the steep growth in the development of startup companies. So even though probably 90% of faculty that are hired here don't know that this is a performance metric. It's something that the university is tracking and reporting. So therefore, it's inherently something that we must value. The second aspect, I think, is the AAU public. So these are the elite public universities that are part of the American Association of Universities. So you can see that back in 2008, the first data point that I got, we were quite a long ways from where the AAU publics were in terms of startup companies. But within that 4-year, 5-year period, we've basically caught up with the elite public universities in the country in terms of the number of companies that we're generating from WSU technologies. So the first point as a faculty member, why are we doing so well over this period of time? And I think there's 2 reasons. One, we've completely changed the visibility of commercialization at WSU through restructuring of the various offices on campus. And one of them is to raise commercialization in its broadest sense and outreach to a vice presidential level. So now this is something that really has a profile within the university. And the second is bringing people like Travis into the academic colleges where there's not an isolated group of people that will file a patent for you if you fill out this detailed form and then you wait for some long period of time. Now, Travis and folks like him are embedded in the colleges, so they know every day what's going on, what's happening, and they're able to identify, as Travis indicated with the upside-down pyramid, where the next potential technologies are and where the next startup companies are. So I credit those 2 factors with this big increase that we're seeing in startup companies from WSU. So the next question as a faculty member, we could say, or our dean could say, or our provost could say, well, how are we going to get to where the AAU publics are? So I think we need to do 2 things, and this is from my hat as a faculty member. I think we need to recognize this as something of value to the faculty member. So I've talked to the people that are forming these 6 companies in 2012 and these 4 companies in 2011 and the 2 companies in the previous 3 years. And one of the things that's a universal theme is that they do this against the common support of their departments and colleges. So they're really mavericks within the institution in doing this. And there's not really that recognition that this is something important and should be rewarded. And I think if we can really make a conscious effort to change that, we can get to where the AAU publics are, maybe even get above where the AAU publics are. And the second is, Russ mentioned it, Travis mentioned the valley of death. So in every step towards commercialization, just from when you fill out the form to file the patent, there's a valley of death that can stop you being successful and becoming number 7 in the companies that we formed, for example, in 2012. So how do we get over that valley of death for faculty members? And I just want to share briefly my experience of how this has worked, I think, very well for me, and hopefully it'll continue in that way. The first is when a faculty has an idea, it typically comes from sponsored research from a federal agency that's supporting basic research like NSF or NIH. But then how do you get that money to get you to the next step where it's not basic research, it's product development, prototype development, proof of concept? So I was very fortunate in the fact that the Dean of Engineering raised private money to essentially give me a little bit of gap funding to get me to the next stage. And that kept the technology developing over that next 6-month period, which was that first valley of death that I experienced. Then, through the work of Anson Fatlin, the Vice President of WSU, I got funding from the Washington Research Foundation, which should be supporting all of our activities and all of these 6 companies in 2012. And they gave me the next gap to keep the technology going. And then through the work of Travis, we got external funding from industry through licensing of the technology that brought more funding in that creates then that gap funding. So we're able to keep the technology moving forward using a variety of private resources, because none of this would be funded by NSF or NIH, basic research funding agencies. So the other piece of data that I pulled out from the WSU strategic plan was the total R&D expenditures from industry as a metric of how well we work with industry to support what industry really wants. And so we can develop companies and technologies from our own research, but we can develop commercialization opportunities through partnering with industry. And again, WSU is doing extremely well. So if you look, for example, in 2008, we brought in less than $7 million from industry. Last year, we brought in over $22 million from industry. Now, we're still, in this case, quite a way behind the AAU public. So the question that faculty would be asking, and maybe the provost is asking the faculty, is how do we get to where the AAU publics are? So we have to come up with innovative ideas of engaging industry at a major level. So not $50,000 here, $100,000 here, but how do we bring in $5 million or $10 million from industry? And so very briefly, in the final minute that I want to present before I turn over to the next speaker, is to show you a very innovative approach that Travis has put forward to promote the battery technology that's being developed by myself and also by Professor Katie Zhang in mechanical and materials engineering. So we're developing technology that's the core IP from WSU. But we need support to continue the patent prosecution to build a strong patent portfolio around that technology. So how do we do that? We partner with someone that has the resources and ability to do that, and that's Intellectual Ventures. So that's covering one of the shortcomings that limit university technology going to the next step. It's having that strong, robust patent portfolio. So then, how do we get the resources into the faculty so they can continue the work? So there's license money that comes from Intellectual Ventures that goes back into my lab and back into Katie's lab that supports our research. So then, with all of our technology, we still need other technology that's out there that we don't have access to. And that can be brought in by technology partners. You put all that together, you bring in some colleagues from other research institutions, for example, University of Washington, University of British Columbia, and other schools, and then you have your Advanced Battery Consortium. And that's how you then attract the big industry. So on the far right, the consumer electronics and battery manufacturers that then put the money into the consortium that continues to support the faculty so they benefit from this work, even if the technology they're developing doesn't become one of those 6 companies. And so this allows then the university to see major influxes of funding. We know at WSU this works because John Ringo, in his CADADIC program, has one of the oldest industry university research centers funded by the National Science Foundation in the country. I think it's 25 years old now. And it brings in the single biggest chunk of industry funding, I believe, into the College of Engineering. And John's been doing this for 25 years. So we know this model works. We just have to find the technologies that we can bundle together with the partners to allow that to become successful.
So I'm still a graduate student here, and my talk would be mostly addressed to a majority of this audience is a graduate student. For those who are not graduate student anymore, most of you was a graduate student, so please participate it as you would be graduate student. So, but before I seem like you a little bit dim, let's stretch out a little bit. I want you to just have your hands in front of you like that. Can you just do it? All right. And then when you stretch and then do this. It was difficult. I see somebody just can't do it. That's how it would feel if I will tell you, try to commercialize your research. So you will get it by the end of this story. And I want to tell you short story and 3 key outcomes out of this story. So when I was starting my PhD here, I thought I really like doing that. And please give me a quick show of hands. Who like to do what they do in school? Really like. And I was very disappointed. After 5 years of doing something great in school that you truly love, you have to leave it and abandon forever. That's his destiny that this system kept for all of you, except me. I'm actually keep doing what I'm doing in school and turning it into a company, which is actually mine. Isn't it great? So how it all started? When I was searching where I want to do my research, I went to several professors, and I told them, I want to do something. Actually, I went to the grants office, too. I want to do something that I want to turn into market afterward. Do you have anything like that? And for most of the visits, the answer was, you know, we really work on something that university will commercialize themselves. They already have that vehicle, or we have something in mind working. Then I start next round. Okay, can I find technology that I can lead commercialization of it? And started next round of talking. And this approach went this way. I have idea in mind. Can I do it in your lab? And my advisor, which I'm really grateful for, said, yes, sure, but there is an issue. Everything that we do in our lab is funded by my money that I got. And if you will be doing what you're doing, I can't pay you money. And for me, it was fair. So I said, sure, let's do it. You know, half year down the road, it was more daunting and more scary, but results started to show up. And with help of the advisor, we put few proposals in, and we got funding. So basically, from crazy idea of materials that work well in the interfaces, we came up to technology that's been funded by, at this point, 2 federal grants. I was PI on both grants. One is from DOE, another from NSF. And that's basically nanotechnology. Let me show you how it looks like. So we basically make nanoparticles, but instead of using nanotubes, they're just flat nanoparticles, like graphene, they're flat. We make sure that the nanoparticles have different termination on 2 different sides. With that different termination on 2 different sides, we have intrinsic properties of self-assembly. Anywhere where the particle will touch the surface, one side will interact with surface different than another, but another one will attach to the surface, right? So, and if you repeat that process one by one, you can create basically self-assembling coatings. In this platform application, you can use it to mix different polymers that are not mixable. You can reinforce material. You can do a lot of stuff, but our application is to create that self-assembling coatings to just modify the top surface of the devices. So that's basically the story. Now, 3 outcomes. Number 1, if you do your research and you want to commercialize it, no matter where you are, you're student or professor, please plan ahead. Way, way, way ahead. because instead of that, you will get later work, right? Second thing, people that you're surrounded with are extremely important. And those not just the people who are in your lab, those people in industry who might be potential clients, those people who might help you, those people who are in commercialization office, those lawyers that might be working on your IP. And that's all that we usually are not aware of, those relationships, those connections. When we in the lab, we usually try to narrow down and go deep. When in commercialization, you have to pull together teamwork. And number 3, this process is hard, daunting. We all here in the Valley of Death people. And any point of this game, you will be learning a lot. There will be a lot of things that you have to make quick changes. Then when you realize that you're here, turn around and do things right quickly. That's it. Thank you very much.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for letting me get on the speaker stand this morning. It's a lot of fun getting in front of people that are curious about the way the world innovates products. I'd like to kind of understand the audience. How many people today are material science type of professionals? How many people are structures type people, people that specialize in structures? What other type of disciplines do we have in the room? Are there any business people? People that are developing businesses or business? It's Tad, right? Okay, Tad's a really interesting guy. He should be up here giving a lecture on how to innovate structure. He innovated the Aerosonde, if I'm not mistaken, years ago, and really successfully changed the world of unmanned aircraft. I'm a professional. I worked at Boeing from 1986 to 1997. I met Russ probably around 1987, somewhere in that time frame. We worked together. He was developing materials for the 777 aircraft, right, the 8276 spec at that time, and has gone on and had a very distinguished career with Boeing. I left in 97, became a director of engineering for a composite railcar company where we made a 90-foot long, 13-foot high, 9-foot wide refrigerated railcar. And in that process, I got exposed to a technology I later developed into InVision that also worked on the 777 structures. We innovated products all the time. When you have a multi-million-dollar budget to take an idea and put it into production, you can do it in a year or two. And especially if you can operate inside of the process and material specs that are existing. And if you have to go outside of that material spec or that process spec, you have a whole team of engineers to make a educated decision about what it means to make that change, and so you can develop it into the product. So we invented technology for the main landing gear door. We invented technology for the rudder, the 777. Both of them were critical cases. One made national news and international news, right? And so the question is why can't we just get the ball rolling and make something happen when you're in a university environment? And why can't we develop these really cool products if we have all these brains and we've got all this eagerness to do that? And the answer is know-how. Right? Russ made a slide, and excuse me, Russ, if I kind of jump to a little bit of different conclusion than you. He said, in his slide, he said, why can't we just go down to the supply chain and they'll help you figure it out? Because they have all this stuff and process to be able to figure this stuff out, and then you can come to us and we'll figure it out with you. Well, the answer, what Russ is really saying is, go find somebody that knows how to do something. If you can find somebody that knows how to do something, you can get to the end, right? So what does it take to get to the end? It's experience, right? You have to have a career path that takes you across a broad technology base, right? So if you're going to innovate a structure, in the case of InVision, for example, we have to understand thermoplastics, we have to understand composites, we have to understand rotational molding, we have to understand blow molding, and we have to understand airplane structures and how they're certified. How many people have got careers on all those technology fronts in the room? Nobody, right? One, right there. Okay, so you could be a really good collaborator with me and help me get the technology moving, okay? So what I'm trying to say is that if you want to innovate and make something real, you have to, excuse me if I'm being a little emphatic here, you have to develop a broad career base, okay? So I'm going to take you through a real brief, extremely fast introduction to our technology, and then we'll talk about business models and strategy and what it really takes to understand strategy. Does something have an economic incentive to change? What is that economic incentive to change? Is it 40% improvement? Is it 20%, 10%? As you answer these questions, they'll take you into understanding whether you can even take something to Boeing or even take it to a supplier, right? So let's run through this real quick. So what do? We're an advanced composite design development company that creates and unitizes composite structures. I saw Russ 7 years ago, and he said, Bill, go to Spirit, and Spirit will help you innovate this structure for us. And I said, well, you know, I've got all this know-how here. He said, yeah, but that's how we do it at Boeing, right? And so I went to Spirit. And Spirit says, Bill, what are you doing trying to make this happen? This is what universities and major companies do. You can't do this, right? And I said, well, I'm going to try. Okay. And so I have the smartest people I know, and these are just some of them. We have some amazingly qualified people. Steve Winkler has done commercial composites his whole career. I've done aerospace and commercial composites my whole career. Brad Fry, I know Russ knows Brad. Brad helps us with materials. But Doug Ives down at Wave has done 777 flaps and 737 winglets and tons of different processes and materials. Jake Levine, that's got the least recognition in here, but is probably one of the most creative engineers I've ever known. He can actually get what's in my head, right? Which I am truly flattered that he's taken the time to actually learn. But what you see here is careers of development and careers of experience and how to, essentially do things that make the world a different place. And so how do you get from point A to point B to point C and on and on and on when you have, and then the answer is you have to have experience levels like this helping you create strategy, right? If you don't have a career of developing, you cannot create a strategy that you're going to be able to enact, right? That strategy has to have economics behind it, and it has to have capability, technical capability, and it has to have a vision. And the most important thing you'll learn, and this is from my EMBA at Foster School of Business, is you have to have a product. If you do not have a product, you do not have a business, right? So finding a product is the #1 thing you will do. And actually, after 7 years, we finally found our product, but we're still in the valley of death. So here you go. Reinventing the wheel. We went out and we were finishing up a contract by the Missile Defense Agency. And they did a big technology application review. They had 20 people like Russ, vice presidents, general managers of Ford and GM and Chrysler and Boeing and Spirit and whoever it is that's supplying the Missile Defense Agency. And they said, Bill, get out of aerospace. it will suck you dry. If you don't get out of aerospace, you will die. And you need to do something in automotive. And we literally left that meeting and went to a gas station to fill up the car. And in comes this truck with a gooseneck on it, said Vision wheel on it. And I looked at it and I go, you know, we could make a really cool wheel. So I walked up to the guy and I said, you know, I think we can make you a really cool composite wheel. And he said, great, let's talk about it. And so we did, and it took about a year to get all that sorted out. But it turns out the automotive industry wants a composite wheel right now. BMW just announced that they're going to do a composite wheel, right? We've been working on ours for about a year and a half now, and we do something really cool with that wheel that no one else can do. So all that happened by accident because we accidentally met a customer, and we accidentally figured out what our product was, right? If we could figure out what our products are earlier, I'd have been at this 7 years ago, I guarantee you, right? So help figuring out what a product is probably the most important thing you can do with your technologies, right? And so we made this wheel. This is the first ever cellular core wheel that was produced in January. And, excuse me, I was supposed to wait for this to have an animation, I think. Oh, I guess it doesn't. Anyway, so you can see here it's hollow, it's got integral ribs, circumferential ribs, radial ribs, stiffeners. There's an embedded metallic fitting in here so we don't have to bond any metal to the composite to take the loads better, right? And by the way, this is the very first ever part out of this tool set. So what you see here is a practically perfect composite part that is made with a team of experienced engineers and not a team that doesn't know what they're doing, right? So what you have to do is you have to ally yourself with people that know how to do the job, right? This is really what I'm saying. This is a $600,000 effort, right, that is analyzed and can be tested. And so the result of this is you have a product that's valuable, right? And so this technology is really critical for breaking through this industry. If we can get this industry to go forward, we'll have with this design, I think we can corner the market. And so this is just, we developed this to Audi and Volkswagen standards, right? So we're pretty close and pretty sure to thinking that we'll get through this design. There's a little bit of scuffle about how valuable it is now. It's amazing when you throw a little blood in the water, how many sharks come around. But I think those troubles are all associated with success as opposed to failure. So I'm really proud to say we're a success, even though it looks like a failure. We did a UAV wing center section a couple of years ago. Again, we had a customer that didn't know what they didn't know, right? We had a techie guy inside of a big company, and he said, this is really cool, why don't you try it? And so I took all of my savings, sold the farm, sold the business, sold the condo, and created a prototype for him. And what we were trying to do is take 26 pieces and get rid of them and turn them into one piece of structure. And so we did. We came up with a design that looks like this. We got rid of all the assembly and reduced all the weight. And by the way, look at these numbers here, 40% weight reduction, 30% cost reduction. That is the definition of a breakthrough. If you do not understand that that's a breakthrough or what a breakthrough is, you're really kind of missing the point of this whole discussion. If you need to be able to say, am I creating a breakthrough technology? Am I creating an improvement technology? Am I creating just a sustaining technology? Because each one of those have different ways of making their ways into production. And they get different levels of attention, right? And then producing the part, just kind of, I know we had more than this. My automations aren't working. There we go. Anybody recognize these processes? I know Russ does, excuse me. Some of it just looks like standard layup, right? There's more. I have more detail, folks. I'm sorry I don't have a more complete presentation for you today, but all this stuff is just standard layup processes, standard thermoplastic processes, standard tooling processes, but they've all been combined to create something truly different and new. If you go to business school, they'll say, hey, you don't have to have all new everything. Just take and reassemble your pieces and components so that you have something completely new. And that's what we did, right? We went and we created something new. We also created a lot of know-how along the way, right, to be able to do this. And as you create that know-how, that's what really creates your business, because nobody else can really take that from you, right? So I guess my presentation wants to focus on breakthrough and improvement. What I think the universities and colleges need to do, and I think as Russ has already pointed out, is that if you focus on the breakthroughs and the improvements, they're a higher level of interactions, right? But they have a business model that supports that, right? They're very rare, but they exist. If you watch the student conferences, if you look at SAMPE or any of the conventions and you go and you go scour the countryside for these technologies, they will start to appear. And if you're watching, you'll find them. And then those are the ones that you should cling to and get business models and put funding into. Because if you're funding improvements, you're going to end up with a lot of disappointments. Because improvements just don't pay the bills, right? Or if they do pay the bills, it's a planned, slow research that takes a long time to implement, right? Another key thing is you have to create a process. Russ is pointing out there's lots of processes they've already put in place to actually make these things happen. And the resources, people. You have to add the right people, the right know-how to be able to do that. And if you add the processes with the right people, you can start to make things happen as long as you have money. So I probably have overstayed my welcome. I don't know if I put you all to sleep, but that's kind of my story. Yeah, you're welcome.